Okay, good evening everyone, and welcome back to another Pirkei Avos evening at Makor HaChaim via Zoom, and the one brave soul who is sitting in the Beis Midrash here tonight. We're coming back to live shiurim. Anybody else that would like to join, the doors are open. Welcome to have you. So we're holding over here just several days before Shavuos, and the end of Pirkei Avos, the last parak, the last chapter, questionable whether or not it's really part of the main body of the Mishnayos or it's just another brisa that was added afterwards, which speaks about the godless and the greatness of Torah, has many, many messages for us to learn. And it behooves us just in this final week, tomorrow, next week, a week from tonight will already be the second night of Shavuos. So let's learn about Torah tonight. Let's try to give ourselves a little bit of chizuk, something to look forward to on the up and coming Yom Tiv, and something that we can prepare ourselves a little bit in advance and then try to take advantage on Yom Tiv and beyond as well. The Mishnah in Perek Vav, the 6th chapter, Mishnah Daled, which is number 4, says over the following: Kach hi darka shel Torah. This is the derech, this is the way of Torah. So we're getting ready for Shavuos. We're getting ready for the all-night learning. The kitchen is stocked to the gills with food, nash and candy and sugar and drinks and 7 different types of coffees and cakes and cookies and cheesecake, you name it. Every stuff is sushi. Can't forget the sushi, all the good stuff. So, kachi darka, let's keep this in mind when Shavuos comes. Kachi darka shel Torah, this is the way of Torah. This is Hi darka, this is the way of the Torah. Pas b'melech teichel, bread and salt you shall eat. Umayim b'amsura tishte, a little measurement of water you can drink. V'ala aretz tishan, and when you want to go to sleep at night, you should sleep on the floor. V'chayei tsar tichye, and you should live a life of tsar, of anguish and of pain. What an amazing life the Torah is. Uba Torah ata omel. And then once that you're barely eating and you're barely drinking and you're sleeping on the floor, you have nothing else to do, so you might as well learn Torah. So in the Torah you should be omel, you should work very hard and be diligent. If you live such a life of depravity, such a life of aestheticism, such a life of tsar, of anguish, say Chazal, Ashrecha v'toivlach, fortunate and good are you. Ashrecha ba'olam hazeh, you are going to have fortune and happiness in this world. V'toivlach la'olam haba, and good will be to you in the world to come. It sounds like such an amazing life, the life of Torah. The life of Torah means you should have no pleasure at all in this world. Not only should you have no pleasure, says the Mishnah, you should eat the minimal amounts of food and drink. You should sleep always on the hard floor. You should feel your back when you move around. And really, chayei tsar tich, you should live a life of suffering and pain. And in that way, you will be omel b'Torah. You'll learn a lot of Torah, and then you'll be happy. And it'll be good for you in this world and the world to come, and everything will be just magnificent. It sounds like a truly beautiful life. A life of happiness, a life of joy, a life of no connection at all to the physical world, a life where you can never indulge in anything that other people say is pleasureful, a life of tsar, of pain, of anguish, of hardships, of tribulations, says the Mishnah, and that is what true happiness is all about. And that is the life of Torah. Obviously, as I am insinuating in my facetious nature over here tonight, it is extremely difficult to understand what this Mishnah is talking about. We're getting ourselves ready for Maimon Har Sinai to stand by the foot of the mountain. We are preparing to receive the greatest gift in the entire universe, called the Torah. We're ready to dedicate our hearts, our minds, our neshamas to learning, to living, to breathing Torah. And the Mishnah says, you should know one thing, before you jump in, full steam ahead, you have to know what the derech, what the pathway to Torah and to mitzvahs are. And that derech is, Chayei Tzar Tichya, it's going to be a really rough life. And if you're not ready to rough it up and tough it out over there, if you're not ready to sleep on the floor and eat just a little morsel of bread and drink a little, like one of those Dixie cups that they have at the doctor's office, that's about as much water. Yeah, that means no 24-ounce lattes. That's what it means. No super gigantic triple big gulp anymore. You can't even on 7-Eleven, July 11th, don't even think of going to get a free Slurpee because you can't eat it anymore. Because the Torah says the PIRKEI AVOS over here, it sounds like the only way to be kainah, to acquire Torah for oneself, is if they're willing to live a life where they have no shaykhis, no connection at all to the physical world. It must be completely spiritual in order to connect to Torah. So the Mishnah seems to be saying, which obviously is very difficult to understand exactly what the Mishnah is referring to. But let us just strengthen the question over here. The Gemara in Pesachim has a machlekes, has a discussion whether or not on Yom Tiv you have a mitzvah of Simchas Yom Tiv, to rejoice in the Yom Tiv. How a person fulfills that mitzvah is with food and with drink. And the Gemara has a machlekes the following. When it comes to Yom Tiv, we have 3 Yom Tovim that we're discussing over here. Discussing Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot. And many learn from here as well, Rosh Hashanah will fit into this also. And the question is that on all of these chagim, all these festivals, how much should a person spend indulged in the gashmis, in the physical pleasures of this world, the delicious food, the tasty wine and the drinks? And how much should a person spend in the realm of learning, of ruchnius, of spirituality? So the Gemara says, machlekes. Some hold you should dedicate the entire day to study, to learning, to prayer. On a Yom Tov, how in the world could a person even think about eating? It's from the holiest days of the year. A person can be elevated to such a high level, they should sit in the Beis HaMidrash and they should learn all day long. There are those who say, no, it's Yom Tov, you have to enjoy yourself, you have to have pleasure, and therefore, kula lechem, the whole day belongs to you. Eat, drink, be merry, enjoy, indulge, imbibe, have the greatest of meats, the sweetest of wines. It's all yours for the taking. And the final opinion in the Gemara, which is really the way that we view every Yom Tov, is more or less chetzi lachem v'chetzi laHashem. Half of the day belongs to Hashem. That means you have to study, you have to learn, you have to make sure that you're doing ruchnius, and half of it goes to lachem, to you. Eat and drink, enjoy, imbibe, take part of all the delicious treats that are in this world. That's the machlekes, three-way argument over here. However, hakol moedim, everybody agrees, whether you hold that on Yom Tov everything goes to Hashem, or you hold on Yom Tov that everything goes to lechem, to you, or you hold 50-50, it goes partly to Hashem and partly to you. Everybody agrees hands down when it comes to Shavuos. When it comes to the day that the Torah was given, everybody agrees, chetzi lechem v'chetzi laHashem. You must make sure that you take care of yourself on Shavuos as well. Cheesecake, fine wine, roasts that are the juices are dripping out, cake, nash, cookies, ice cream, a sushi in the middle of the night. You have to make sure all of these things are there. So the question is begging to be asked over here. The Mishnah in PIRKEI AVOS says right now, Kachi darcha shel Torah, the way that a person is going to be amul b'Torah, to learn Torah, is if they're willing to live a life of chayei tzar tichya. I'm willing to live a life where I totally remove myself from the physical. I barely eat, I barely drink, I sleep on the floor, and I'm ready HaKadosh Baruch Hu to live my life in such a way I don't need anything from the physical world, all ruchnius, all spirituality, and that's the way, like it says, U'ba'Torah ta'ama, then you'll be able to learn, and you'll be happy and fortunate in this world and the world to come. That's what the Mishnah says. And now we have a Gemara that's telling us over here that when it comes to the Yom Tov of Shavuos, even to the Man Da'amah, the opinion who holds that by every other Yom Tov, it all belongs to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, everybody agrees that when it comes the Me'ina Nami Lachem, that when it comes to Shavuos, everybody is hands down in agreement that you, the individual, must have pleasure from the physical world on Shavuos. Says Rashi, why? Sheyismach boi b'maichel b'mishteh, you must rejoice with food and with drink. Laharois shanayechu makubal yom zeli Yisrael, to show that this day, the day of Shavuos, which is the day that we receive the Torah, is something that is pleasing and accepted by all of Klal Yisrael. Shenitna Torah bo, because that is the day that the Torah was given. Wait a second, if that's the day that the Torah was given, and we are so ecstatic that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has given us the Torah, and we can't dream or think of anything else in our lives that could be more meaningful, then we should do like it says in the Mishnah. And the Mishnah says over here, live a life with nothing to do with this physical world, rather engage only in ruchnius and spirituality, forget about the pleasures of this world. And the Gemara goes on over here, and it says the following, Rav Yosef, the great Rav Yosef, B'yoyim Sarta on Atzeres, which is on Shavuos, Omar, he said, Avdili egletlos, I want to make for myself the third calf of the litter over here, which the Gemara says elsewhere, the third calf born to the mother is always the most tender, the meatiest, the juiciest, it's the best tasting one. So he would make for himself the finest meat of all on Shavuos. Omar, and he said, Iloha Yoma de Garim, if it wouldn't be for this day that caused the great Torah to come down to this world, so Kamo Yosef Ike Beshuka, I'd have to say to myself, how many Yossis, how many Joes there are in the Shuk, in the marketplace, I would be one of them. If it wouldn't be for the day called Shavuos, the day that Klal Yisrael stood by Har Sinai, and we received the Torah, said Rav Yosef, the great Rav Yosef, I'd be no different than any other Joe on the street, in the marketplace, shopping and running here and running there and pumping iron and working out, watching movies, doing who knows what. I'd be like everybody else. But since the Torah was given to Klal Yisrael at Har Sinai, when it came to Shavuos, therefore I'm a different person, and so I celebrate on Shavuos. I eat the tastiest of meats that I could possibly make. Says Rashi over here, Rashi writes, if it wouldn't be for that day called Shavuos, Shalamaditi Torah v'nisor mamti, because that the Torah was given in Har Sinai, I'm able to learn Torah, and I'm elevated because of the Torah. There's many other people in the marketplace whose name are Yosef. What would be different between me and between them? I would be like any other person if I didn't have Torah. If Hashem never made a Har Sinai. If Klal Yisrael never stood there and were makabel, received the Torah upon themselves, so then you would see nothing different between me and anybody else named Joe who's on the street. We'd be living the same exact kind of life. But since that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave me the Torah, and He shared it with Klal Yisrael at Har Sinai, and we all received it together, Ki'ish echad u'belev echad, like one person, and we did it emphatically and enthusiastically. So that's why I'm different than everybody else, the other 7.8 billion people in the world, because I'm a Yid and I have Torah. So I'm going to celebrate. I'm going to celebrate with the biggest, bestest barbecue you could imagine on Shavuos. It's going to, when I put the sauce, it's going to be dripping down my hands as I'm sinking my teeth into that third calf from the mother. Rabbi Yosef, the Mishnah says, not like you. The Mishnah says that the way that a person should live a life of Torah is a life where the darcha, the way of the Torah, is a little bit of bread, a little bit of water, sleep on the floor, don't ask for too much, and then you'll just learn and learn and learn and learn, and you'll be happy in this world and the world to come. And Shavuos, which is the greatest day of celebration of Torah itself, should that not be the day that a person dedicates all of their energies to the darka shel Torah, to the way of Torah? What is all of this? The Mishnah Gemara says, first of all, everybody agrees you got to have a good wine and good meat and good cheesecake and everything else. At least half the day has to belong in that arena. And then Rabbi Yosef says, because I'm so overwhelmed with the greatness of the Torah, that it was given to our nation, and because of that I'm a different person, my celebration is good food. Your celebration should be, go lock yourself in the Beis Midrash. Shah Kodesh Baruch, how much you appreciate His Torah. Learn 24 hours out of the Shavuos. You know, we have one night. Normally, most people say one night to learn. That's the minhag, because, as the Chavetz Chaim brings down, that when it came time to give the Torah at Har Sinai, the Jewish people, they were so excited about receiving the Torah, they went to sleep. And the alarm clock is going off, and nobody's waking up. So HaKadosh Baruch had to come down to the foot of the mountain, and he had to clap, he had to bang on the doors of the tents of all the Jewish people and say, wake up, I'm ready to give the Torah. So because we slept on that first night that the Torah was given, therefore, to be mesaken, to correct and to rectify the sleepiness of the Jewish people, so we have the custom to stay up the entire night of Shavuos and learn, so that when the daylight breaks in the morning, we are already awake, fired up, and ready to go to receive the Torah on Shavuos. So Rabbi Yosef, so that's, most people do one night. However, you will find people that one night is not enough to show the devotion to the Torah. One night is not enough to show how much they love HaKadosh Baruch Hu for giving us the Torah. So there are throughout pockets of the world, you will find people who will stay up both nights of Shavuos, and they will learn through the night, a second night as well, because it's another night where we are celebrating the revelry of the Torah. And there are people that I know of, I even know them by name, who made it their business to stay up almost throughout 48 hours of Shavuos, learning and learning and learning one Masechta after another, because they said, Kachi Darka Shel Torah, that's what Torah is all about. So how does the great Rav Yosef end up indulging on Shavuos in ribs and in a roast and sliders and the like? How does he indulge in that? Why doesn't he say that since that the Torah is the greatest gift ever given, I'm just going to immerse myself in a life of learning Torah hour after hour after hour? What is the Darcha Shel Torah? Rashi writes on this Mishnah, which perhaps will allow us to take a deep breath over here and realize that we're going to survive. Even if you don't go home and sleep on the floor tonight, even if you want to have a midnight snack, whatever cake or pastry it is that's on the menu tonight, you can still have Torah. And Rashi says the following. What does it mean that pas b'melech toicha, that bread and salt you should eat? Lo yala asher omer sheyamud b'chaytzar. This Mishnah is not talking about a rich man, that he has to live a life of chayetzar, of suffering, because he cannot have any physical pleasure and enjoyment from this world. The Mishnah is not talking about him. If you think that that's the only way that he's going to be able to learn. Ella hachikama, rather the Mishnah is telling us the following. Afilu ein la'adam ella pas b'melech. It's telling you that even if a person doesn't have anything else to be able to eat besides pas b'melach, all that they have is a little bit of bread and a little bit of salt. Ve'ein loikar ukeses lishon, and you don't have a pillow or a blanket to sleep upon. Ella ala aretz, you must sleep on the ground. Al yimno milasa igba, Do never desist from being Isaac, from being involved in the learning of Torah. Rashi comes and he saves the day for every spoiled brat American that is listening tonight. That's what I have over here. And Rashi says, the Sefer Limud is fine. So Rashi says over here, what is the pshat? The pshat is that it's not that you need to make sure that that's the only way you live. Where you're going to live, you have money, you have a house, you have central air, you have a pillow, you have a Sealy Posturepedic beautiful mattress that you just bought, and you have cushy blankets to keep you warm in the winter night, and you even have carpet on the floor so your toes will never get cold on the winter mornings when it's frosty outside in California at 63 degrees. So with all of that, says Rashi, you're fine. You're okay. As long as you put it into your mind that if you would ever get to the point where the only way that you could live a life of Torah would mean you must live with a little bit of bread and salt and a little bit of water to drink, and you don't have a couch, and you don't have a mattress, and you don't have a pillow, and you'd have to sleep on the floor if you would need to, and you'd be willing to live a life of tsar, of physical suffrage, if you'd be willing to do all of that, says Rashi, then even when you have the money, even when you have the funds, even when you have the abilities, you are allowed to treat yourself properly, what you have. You don't have to go down below your means, and you would be permitted to be able to have all of that and still live a life of Torah. So Rashi is being mechadish, he's bringing us a very important point over here. And that point is that yes, it's true that a person when they need to, they will live a life where they don't have all the trimmings. Nevertheless, and notwithstanding, if you have them right now, you're safe. As long as the Torah is still preeminent by you, as long as the Torah is something that you will indulge in and you will be amal in and you will work hard to be able to understand, so then, says Rashi, you're still entitled to eat chicken, meat, fish. You can even use some ketchup and mustard when it's called for. You can even have a glass of coffee that's bigger than this. It could be this big if you want. You can sleep comfortably. You can turn on the air conditioning in the summer, and you can turn on the heat in the winter months. You do not have to worry, says Rashi. All of that is permissible as long as you know, and as long as you are certain inside of yourself, if I didn't have everything that I have, I would still live a life of Torah. There's a famous story of the two Gedolei Yisrael from the days of Europe, probably about maybe 100 plus, 150 years ago. One was named the Shagas Aryeh, and the other one was named the Pnei Yoshua. The Shagas Aryeh was known far and wide as one of the most brilliant minds of the generation, and he was also known as one of the poorest people of the generation. The Pnei Yoshua was known also as one of the biggest minds of the generation, and he was known as well as one of the wealthiest Jews of the generation also. And these two Gedolim, these two great leaders, they both had their Sfarim, their books that they had written. They both had quite a following of students and Talmidim that were after them for their Chachma, for their wisdom. And they lived totally different lives, completely different lives. I think I spoke about the Shagas Aryeh before once. The Shagas Aryeh, and he and his wife, they were so poor, they lived in a little tiny shack. And they didn't even have money for plates, for milchigs and for fleishigs. So they had like a wood table type of thing. Carved out in one of the tables was a bowl. And that bowl was for the fleishigs, and carved out in another wooden table was a bowl, and that was for the milchigs. And that's the way that they ate fleishigs or milchigs. That's how they did it. They didn't have plates like we have, silverware that we have, cups that we have. It was a very sparse, primitive life that they lived. So the Shagas Aryeh and the Pnei Yoshua once met each other. And the two of them could not stop praising the other. And the Shagazari said to the Pnei Yoshua, it's incredible. Your chachma, your wisdom, how much Torah you have, your svarim that you've written, they're incredible. They're just unbelievable. And so the Pnei Yoshua said, what do you want from me? I'm a very wealthy man. My food is taken care of. My cleaning service is taken care of. My house is taken care of. Everything is taken care of. I have nothing else to do in my life except learn Torah. If I wouldn't be the Pnei Yoshua, something would be wrong. But you, Shagas Aryeh, you are incredible. Your chachma, your wisdom, your mind, you're known as the biggest genius in the generation. Your wisdom is incredible. So the Shagas Aryeh said, what do you want? He says, I have nothing. I have no money. I have no possessions. I have no business. I have a tiny little shack house. I don't have to clean. I have nothing. I have nothing else to do with my life besides learn. So it would be a crime, it would be a shame if I wasn't learning as much as I was learning. So I heard once, many, many years ago when I was in yeshiva, from a Rebbe of mine, Rabbi Ephraim Eisenberg, who was the son-in-law of Rabbi Mordechai Gifter. Rav Gifter was an American-born boy and born and bred out of, I think, from Baltimore, and he ended up going on to become one of the Gedolei Yisrael of the generation. And his son-in-law said, it used to be that the challenges of the generation were like the Shagas Aryeh. People didn't have enough money, they didn't have enough food on the table, things were sparse, it was a life of primitivity. He said, but the American Bacher, the American boy, the American Jew, we have the challenge of the Pnei Yoshua, where we are overwhelmed with the luxuries, overwhelmed with the pleasures of this world, and yet still with all of that, we're not allowed to get drawn after it, and we must make it our business to stay involved and engaged in the learning and the living of Torah. And that's really what Rashi is pointing out over here. If you have food, and you have drink, and you have the roof over your head, and you have a comfortable bed to sleep in, there is nothing wrong with that, except you must realize with all of that, your main occupation, your main goal in life is to ensure that you are learning, that you are growing, that you are striving, and that you are trying to achieve higher levels in your ruchnius, in your Torah learning. And if HaKadosh Baruch Hu would make it that one day you would not have all the luxury that you have right now, it would not stop you 1 minute from learning. On the other hand, you would be able to throw yourself with more amelis, with more effort and hard work into the Torah. And the Mefarshim say over here, what does this mean? V'ima ta'iseken, if you will do this, ashrecha ba'olam hazeh, happy and fortunate are you in the world to come, in this world. What kind of happiness is there in this world if a person is living a life of chayei tsar, of pain, of suffering, of no food, of no drink, of being a minimalist? Where's the happiness? This world happiness is a big steak. Happiness is a big scoop of ice cream. Happiness is being able just to chill out a little bit and relax. Where's the happiness in this life? So he writes fascinating like this, Ki be'emes. The truth is, Genai Gadol Hu La'adam Inyan Achila. Food is really a big embarrassment to mankind. Why? Inyan Achila, Genai Gadol Hu La'adam Inyan Achila. Food, the whole fact that we have to eat, is really, it's like an embarrassment to us. Why? Ki yikach davar gashmi. You take something physical, v'yitnehu b'meyav, and you stick it into your intestines, and your whole life depends upon this food that you're eating. The sandwich, the burger, the fries, the carrots, the celery, the fruits, the vegetables, the yogurt, whatever you're eating. Your life depends upon food. Says the likutim that I have over here, however your neshama, which is the spiritual component in your life, it's a disgrace and an embarrassment to the neshama that the only way you could survive in this world is if you are piling up your intestines with physical delights and food. The neshama doesn't want food. The neshama is not concerned about another tasty treat. The neshama wants ruchnias, the neshama wants Torah, the neshama wants mitzvahs, the neshama wants to soar. So how could it be that our real chiyas, our real life is the spiritual realm? How could we be happy? How could a person not be embarrassed, says the Likutim over here, from the fact that we have to rely so much upon the physical world? And therefore he writes, Acha hechrech lo yiguna. If you eat what is necessary, because your body obviously needs something to sustain itself, lo yiguna, there's no shame or embarrassment in that. Aval toisefes u'maisaros achila. However, when you add on more and you bring in luxury dining, when you bring that into your life, extras, things that only an American can come up with that they need to eat. You know, I heard that if you go to Europe and you go to a restaurant in Europe, an American's going to be very disappointed because there's something in Europe called portion control, which means that you get the portion that is really befitting for your body. In America, we are used to extra portions, and everything has to be big, and they have to pile it on high. And if you go to a restaurant, I was somewhere somewhat recently, and they gave me my portion of food. I was like, hey, that's all? Where's the rest? Says the Kutim over here, that it's to eat what you need to survive, that's all good. But to load it on, to pack it in, to add extra luxuries and treats, that already is the disgrace. Whose sichlos, its foolishness, ha'im timnu lizbazois, v'chacham amiti, a true scholar, yismach b'miut moisaros, he'll be happy with just a little bit extras. V'zeu shomar, that's what it means. Ashrecha ba'olam hazeh. Fortunate are you in this world. Why? Because if I could live a life where I take from this world what I need, and I fill myself up with the physical sustenance, and I don't get drawn after it, I don't make it my life, then a person is going to be able to truly succeed and thrive in a life of Torah. And then this world is a place of pleasure. This world is a place of goodness. When I use the world for the right things, then, says the Mishnah over here, then it's not a disgrace. It's not embarrassing. You're not called overindulging. On the other hand, you're using the world for what it was meant to be used for, as a vehicle to give you the energy to be able to go and to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So this world, we're seeing over here, not for the extras, not for the luxuries. So we're left back with our question from the very beginning. In the beginning we said that Rabbi Yosef was celebrating on Shavuos, that the great simcha was that he was Yosef, not Joe on the street over there. He wasn't a regular person who just was like every other 7.8 billion people in the world who doesn't have Torah, doesn't have mitzvahs, because I learned, unis ramamti, because I was elevated. So therefore I have to thank the Rebbeinu Shalom for everything he's given me, and therefore I want to express that how? In a good piece of calf steak, a good piece of meat. You're not supposed to indulge. So the Torah, the Gemara is telling us over here that the simcha of Shavuos and the simcha of receiving the Torah and the simcha of being a Torah Yid is that a person who allows the Torah to run their life, a person who allows the Torah to permeate their decisions and what they do with themselves, that person, by the very definition of the Torah outlook that they have, they will know how to use this world in the right way, and they will not get drawn after it in the unfortunate manner. And therefore on Yom Tiv, when there is a mitzvah of lechem to take care of yourself, the body also has to feel good on a Yom Tiv. The body also has to feel invigorated and has to have pleasures. And therefore you won't be drawn after the pleasures of the meat that you're going to eat. You won't be drawn after unnecessarily the pleasures of the cheesecake that everybody's waiting for at 7 o'clock in the morning after they stayed up the whole night. You won't be drawn after those pleasures. On the other hand, you'll use them to enhance the real simcha, the real joy that is inside of you, and that is the pleasures that are there inside of your neshama. The body is a vessel that has to house the neshama. The body must be calm and relaxed and satisfied. Sometimes, especially on Yom Tiv and on Shabbos, we see there's a mitzvah to eat tasty food. The body can be able to enjoy itself just a little bit more, but I'm not going to be drawn after it. I'm not going to make it the bulk of my day. I'll taste, I'll enjoy, my body will be at ease, and now I'll be able to allow that neshama, says Rabbi Yosef, my neshama, which was nisramamti, which was elevated, will continue to elevate itself in that special and magnificent way. So the life of Torah is an amazing life. The life of Torah is where I have my vision clear and I understand how I'm supposed to live. And the way I'm supposed to live is, the ikr, the main part of my life, is ruchnius, spirituality. That which is most important is the Torah that I learn and the Torah that I keep. HaKadosh Baruch Hu dropped me into this physical world, got to take care of the body, got to take care of the physical. I have to do that. If you can manage to subsist on the bare minimum and what you need just to be able to survive and sustain yourself, that's gewaldig, says the Mishnah. That's tremendous, incredible. Try to do that. However, if you're a person of means, which means you are an American and you have a little extra money, you can buy this and you can buy that, and you can put extra food on your table even during the week, you're allowed to do that. As long as you don't get drawn after that world. As long as you don't become the person who's at another restaurant every single night. He has ordered everything that there is on the menu twice and then some. He's got a personal connection with the chef. He walks into the kitchen over there. Hey, how you doing? The chef jumps out of his skin when he sees him because he knows that's about another $500 that we dropped that night. He gets a nice little tip over there. And the chef, can you make it like this? Could you, a little, last night was a little too medium rare. Tonight, a little bit. Yeah, if that's the way that the life is, says the Mishnah over here, that's too much already. But if you use the physical parts of this world to sustain yourself, to give you chizuk, everybody needs different. Some people could subsist on a little. Some people, they need a little bit more. Some people need even a little bit more. As long as you're using that little bit more to give yourself the physical pleasure that you need to be able not to focus your energies into the world of Torah, says Rashi, it's all good. But you have to know in your mind that if there would ever be a time in your life that you cannot walk into the kitchen at the restaurant and tell the chef how you want him to cook your meat, and if there would become a time where you cannot stop in the bakery every single day and pick yourself up a few donuts and some rugelach, if there would come a time when you'd have to trade in the fancy automobile for a more simple Hyundai or a Honda because that's what you could afford right now, not only will it not change the way in which you learn Torah, you'll be able to be more amal. You'll be able to work harder in the Torah because you're not going to be drawn around by all the different things from the physical world that take our mind and our vision and our passions away from ruchnius and transfer them to the gashmius. So there is the Chayza Milublin asked the following question. He heard this from his Rebbe, the Maggid of Mezrich. And he said like this, the Gemara tells us, famous Gemara, Bacha Rebbe cried, V'omar, now this is going on a famous Gemara over there. This Gemara is about Elazar ben Dordoi, who was a person who was a man of great ill repute. He did many sins in his life, And at the end of his life, he did an enormous amount of tshuva in several hours. And in those several hours, he cried his neshama out of him, and he died as a Baal Tshuva. And after he died as a Baal Tshuva, a bas kol, a heavenly voice rang out, and it said, Ashrecha Reb Elazar ben Dordoi, shezacha shekayna ilamo sha'achas, that you were zeicha, you merited place in the world to come. So Rebbe cried the following cry. There are people that acquire the world to come in sha'achas, in one moment, whereas others have to work so hard, it takes them a lifetime to acquire their world to come. So the Maggid of Mezrich asked the following question. Why is Rebbe crying that this man merited to have his world to come in sha'achas, in 1 hour? It's a miraculous thing. The man lived a life of sin all of his life. He was on the way out into the land of the Rishoim, of the wicked. He wakes up to the world of tshuva at the very end. He does tshuva, he klaps al chet, he does vidu, he confesses all of his sins. He puts his head between his knees, he cries himself all of his sins out of him. And therefore the Baskol, the heavenly voice, says, this man acquired his world in 1 hour. Why should you cry? You should be elated for such a person. He was misguided all of his life, and finally in the very end he realizes what he was doing wrong, and then he does tshuva, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in his infinite kindness and wisdom, he receives that tshuva, and the man gets the world to come. Rebbe, why are you crying over that? You should be elated for him. You should be so happy for him. So the Maggid of Mezrich said, no. He says, Adaramba. So he said, Rebbe was crying because if you could achieve the world to come in 1 hour, that must mean then that the world to come that you achieved is not that chashiv, is not that valuable and prominent after all. Because me'achar sheloi nikna al yedei amal ha'torah v'kiyum ha'mitzvos kol yomav, the real kinyan, the real acquisition of the world to come is when a person spends their life, their energies, their hard work, putting it all together, learning and davening and doing mitzvahs and pushing themselves to the limitations. That's the ultimate goal for a person in this world, to achieve the greatest treasure of all in the world to come. So therefore Rebbe was bach, he cried, how could it be? A person earned their world to come in only 1 hour? What could they have accomplished in 1 hour? Okay, it's a miracle, but what could they really accomplish? Because we learn in the Mishnah over here, the real Torah, the real mitzvahs, the real madregas, the real levels that a person is going to reach are the levels that a person accomplishes and achieves with hard work. And that's what the Mishnah in a way is saying over here. The Mishnah is teaching us that the true darcha shel Torah, the real derech, the real pathway, the avenue that will allow us to accomplish and to achieve Torah in a higher level, in a more beautiful way, is the one in which is without all of the trimmings, without all of the luxuries, without all of the drives and the passions here of this world, but rather a life that allows us to live more simply and more focused on Torah and on mitzvahs. And when a person has that focus, they are going to be able to dedicate their energies and their life to living and learning a life of Torah. And Rabbi Nachman of Breslov says over here that that's the ashrecha ba'olam hazeh. That's why such a person is happy in this world. And he points out, find me a rich man who's truly happy. He says, every rich man, every president, every king, every minister, he says they live a life of constant daigas, of constant worries. As the Mishnah tells us elsewhere, my bin achasim, the more acquisitions and property and possessions that a person has, mar beidaigas, the more worries they have. The more geld, the more money you have, the more that you own, the more land that's under your name, the more business that you are doing, the more that you are engaged in export and import, the more that you're trying to corner the market, says Chazal, the more you are going to be distracted from the more important things in life. The most important thing in life that you should be marbe, that you should have a lot of, that's why it says in the Mishnah over there, marbe Torah. When you increase Torah, marbe chaim, you increase life. Marbe nechasim, you increase your possessions. Marbe daigus, you get a lot more worries. But marbe Torah, you increase your Torah. You increase the life. You increase the meaning of life. You increase the desire, the passion of life, which is a ruchni, is a spiritual life. Says Rabbi Nachman over here, that's the pshat, that a person who is able to exist on less instead of more, a person is able to live the darkah shel Torah, the pathways of Torah, which is a person who's going to live with just a little bit of bread and a little bit of water, and if he has to sleep on the floor, he'll sleep on the floor, no problem. And he's willing to chaye tzar tichya, to live a life of physical suffering. Such a person will truly find happiness in this world, because his focus will not be on what restaurant he's going to tonight. His focus will not be on, which flavor ice cream are you serving me on? And I don't like that flavor. Do you have anything else? I'm sorry, only vanilla and chocolate? Never mind, it's okay, I'll have something else. A person who is entrenched in the physicality of this world, a person who desires the pleasures, the nash of this world, that person will have a very hard time staying focused, because all the daigas, the worries, the concerns that are there, the problems that they bring upon themselves will strip them and rob them of their happiness and their joy. It'll make it very, very difficult for that person's mind, when they're sitting down to learn, to stay focused on the words that they are studying. It'll make it hard to recognize the benefit in pushing themselves off the couch, out of the bed, away from the table, to leave the meal, to make sure that they go for their shiur, to learn in their class, to study and the like. And therefore, the real happiness, the real joy that a person is going to achieve in this world is when he's memayet, when he decreases the physicality, and he is marbe in the Torah, he increases the Torah, because marbe Torah, when you increase Torah, marbe chaim, life. Not talking about the physical life, we're talking about the ruchnius, the spiritual life that a person will be able to imbibe every single day, that there is more and there is more and there is more Torah that is a part of them. So as we are coming to the Yom Tov of Shavuos, and it seems to be that for some reason a lot of this Yom Tov revolves around food, which is obviously not what it's supposed to. But we know that the women are busy planning already. The menus I already have. I'm in negotiations with my children right now. Can we have a milchig meal? I'm not a big fan of milchigs. And on Yom Tov, there's a special mitzvah of Simchas Yom Tov. And the only way you could really rejoice on Yom Tov in the right way, says the Gemara, is with basar v'yayin, with meat and with wine. So how can I serve crepes? How can I serve cheesecake for a meal? I'll deny myself the pleasures of the Simchas Yom Tov. So we're negotiating right now. Which meal? Is there going to be a meal? Maybe just Kiddush? We don't know yet. But there's so much talk about food on this Yom Tov. And that's about the last thing that we should be talking about. The main thing that we should be talking about on Shavuos is Shavuos. The main thing is the Torah that was given Har Sinai. The main thing is that the Torah is so vital to our chayim, to our existence, that if in fact I had to live a life where I'm sleeping on the floor. Years ago I was in Eretz Yisrael with my son before his bar mitzvah, and we were staying by Rav Moshe Chadash, Zecher Tzadik Livracha, and his Rebbetzin. She should live a long life. And my son and I would eat breakfast with the Rebbetzin in the morning. It was an amazing, amazing experience for the two of us. And she herself comes from a very, very illustrious family. She goes back to Rav Itzel of Petersburg. Rav Itzel of Petersburg was one of the main disciples of Rav Yisrael Salanter. So this woman is a Balas Musar. She has Musar in her bones and her blood. And so we would sit there with her while we're eating breakfast, and she's cooking and putting food on the table, and she's darshaning away the whole breakfast. She's telling stories and drashas. So she told us an amazing story about her father-in-law, Rav Meir Chadash. Rav Meir Chadash was an Ilui, he was a genius. And when he was a young boy, about 13 years old, his parents sent him from the small town that he lived in. He had to travel very far by himself, and he ended up in Slobodka to go and learn in the Slobodka yeshiva, which was one of the premier yeshivas of the time in Europe. He gets to the yeshiva, and he looks like a little boy that's walked into the hallways of the house of study, and they say, "Can we help you, little boy?" And he says, "I might look little, but I'm here to learn in the yeshiva." And people laugh when you're a kid, dude. This is a place for a higher level learning over here, where everybody was upper teens, they were young 20s. He said, "I'm here." And he had a meeting with the Alter of Slobodka. And the Alter was very impressed by his knowledge and his grasp of Torah at such a young age. But he told him, "Listen, Meir, I have no room at all in the dormitories." He said, "If you want to stay in the yeshiva, I'll let you try it out. But you're going to have to sleep in a house of a shoemaker down the street. It's a little bit crowded in there. There's a lot that's going on. But that's all that I can offer you. And if you could find yourself the ability to live inside that house, you can stay in the yeshiva." So, sure enough, Meir Chadash was determined. He was 13 years old. He traveled all of this way. He wanted to learn in the great Beis Midrash of Slobodka, and he went to stay in that house. Now, the shoemaker not only lived in that house, I guess we'll call it his workshop was in the house as well. So Meir Chadash used to come back to the house to eat, and he used to come back to the house to sleep. And he used to come back sometimes to rest a little bit. And the shoemaker was always busy day and night, chopping leather, banging nails into the shoes. There was so much noise in that house. And Meir Chadash, as a young boy, was going nuts. He said, how can I live in such a house? There's so much noise. Every time he tried to pick up a sefer to learn, he couldn't learn. It was just banging, 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 banging. So he said he had a choice. He realized that he had a choice. Either he is going to allow all of the noise that the shoemaker is making over here to bother him and disrupt him. He won't be able to learn, he won't be able to eat, he won't be able to sleep while he's there. Or he's going to learn how to block the noise out of his mind and stay focused in on whatever it is that he's doing at that time. And as a result of that, Rav Meir Chadash, for the rest of his life, had the uncanny ability to pick up any sefer, any book, and the minute that he would zoom in to the words, this is before there was Zoom, the minute that he would zoom into the words of that sefer, everything in the world shut off, and he was totally and completely absorbed in the words of Torah that there were in front of him. Says the Mishnah over here in PIRKEI AVOS, the Mishnah is telling us that if in fact you could live a life where you are not going to be absorbed and you're not going to be distracted and you're not going to become so part of all of the pleasures of everything that is physical here in this world, then you should know that Ashrecha ba'olam hazeh, fortunate and happy will you be in this world, v'toiv lach, and it will be good to you in the world to come. Because the amount of Torah that you're going to have, the amount of Torah that you're going to learn, the amount of ruchnius that you're going to increase, like we said, mar b'Torah, mar b'chaim, the amount of life that you're going to be able to absorb yourself and entrench yourself in, and you'll be able to push away little by little by little by little the extra luxuries and the added things that a person doesn't really need. But again, as Rashi is telling us, know thyself. And if you know for yourself you need a certain cut of meat, and you need a certain amount of chicken, and you need a certain kind of cheese, and there's a certain kind of coffee that gets your juice running early in the morning over there, so you can go to a shacharis and you can put on your tefillin and you can daven like a mensch, and you can make it out to the shir at night, even though you're exhausted. But you take that one cup of coffee and it gives you that trigger to be able to learn. Or you have to take a bite of cake at 9 o'clock at night to keep yourself going so you can do that. It's all okay, says Rashi. As long as the Mishnah is telling us, as long as it doesn't become your life. If you're using the physical world to motivate yourself more for the sake of ruchnius, it's all good. If you get to that point where you have to give it all up just for Torah, that's all that the Mishnah is asking you to do. And that's what it says over here in the Likutim, that when a person recognizes that to say that I live because of the food that is stuffed into my intestines, that should be an embarrassment to our neshamas. So then we say, it's not because of that. I'm just using that to take care of my physical needs, to give myself the energy that is necessary to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Then there's nothing to be ashamed about. There's nothing to be embarrassed about. As Rav Yosef himself said, on Shavuos, it's such a great day, it changes my status from everybody else in the world. Otherwise, I'd be like any Joe in the shuk, in the marketplace over there. My celebration is, I know how to use the physical world. I know that a good piece of steak on Yom Tov, that simcha, that is simcha's Yom Tov, it gives menucha and pleasure to my body, and now my neshama can soar even more. We should be zeichem Yitz Hashem, as Shavuos is coming upon us. Yes, help your wife plan the menu and go to the store and buy her all the ingredients for every single tasty dish that she wants to make, and enjoy every bite that you take, and make sure you compliment your wives and the hosts of whatever homes that you're in to let them know you appreciate all the hard work and the effort that went into it. I remember once, one of the first years that we had a large crowd for Shavuos, we're still living in Yeshiva Lane in Baltimore. And we had a fridge. The fridge before Shavuos began, it was packed. It was so stuffed you could barely close the fridge. And we had meal after meal after meal, and by the time that Shavuos was over, there was almost nothing left in the fridge. Almost nothing left at all. So my wife and I are looking at the fridge at the end of Shavuos. So can you imagine, can you believe it? Before the Yom Tov began, this thing was so packed, you couldn't even close the door, and now it's empty. How much food we ate. And we comment to ourselves that we hope not only the food that we ate on Yom Tov was delicious and filled us up, but the Torah and the learning and the ruchnius, that is the real mar bechaim, that is what is going to increase our lives and really fill us up to the top, be'ez Hashem. So we should be zeich on this Shavuos to spend our time wisely, to engage ourselves in study of Torah, to live a life of Torah as best as we possibly can, to make commitments, stronger commitments to the Torah for the up and coming year. As we mentioned on Shabbos, this is the Yom Tov, it's the Rosh Hashanah of our Torah, which means HaKadosh Baruch Hu is judging us how much Torah we're going to have in our lives for the up and coming year. How much? Up to you. If we spend Shavuos wisely, yes, you can have sushi and you can have ice cream, you can have all these things, but that's just to keep you going. To show HaKadosh Baruch Hu that I understand that the ikar, the main thing of my life, is the Torah, is my learning, is my embracing and my love that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that I have for the lekach toiv, the good treasure that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has given us, and in that schus will be zeichet to an emisa, Kabbalah HaTorah, will we receive the Torah upon ourselves in the most truest way possible, just like they did by Har Sinai, mitach simcha, with joy, with happiness, with awe, with reverence, with miracles, sights and sounds and wonders. And Be'ez Hashem, we should be zeichet to the ultimate Kabbalah's Pnei Hashchina b'mheira v'yameinu.
Thank you, Rabbi Horowitz.
Pleasure. Have a wonderful night, everyone.